Okay, so you want to own an airport, not shares in an airport company, not a private jet that uses somebody else's runway, a real airport. Your land, your hangars, your fuel truck. Yes, you can actually buy an airport. The runway is the cheap part of the lesson. Your name on the sign beside the runway. And, unlike owning an NFL team or a casino on the Las Vegas Strip, this fantasy is not automatically reserved for billionaires. At the time this episode was researched, an actual airport in New Jersey was advertised for $2.5 million. The listing included roughly 35 acres, a paved 3,100-foot runway, a parallel taxiway, Jet A fuel, 9 T hangars, offices, aircraft parking, and an operating maintenance business. $2.5 million, less than some houses in New York or Los Angeles. You could sell a successful company, put a real airport under contract, and begin due diligence without needing billionaire money. There is only one problem. A 3,100-foot runway severely limits the business jets, payload, weather conditions, and trip lengths you can reliably serve. The property may be an airport. It is not automatically the airport business you wanted to buy. So you find a larger field near a growing metropolitan area. A 5,200-foot paved runway. Enough land for expansion. Old hangars, a tired fuel facility, no scheduled airline service. You acquire the existing airport, rebuild the lighting, improve the pavement, expand the hangars, and open your own fixed base operator, or FBO. Total project cost? $15 million. Then the first business jet lands. It touches your runway for less than 1 minute. You could charge a landing fee. Many general aviation airports do not. The jet could leave without buying fuel, without renting a hangar, and without paying for any service. Your runway handled the aircraft perfectly. Your business earned almost nothing. That is the paradox at the center of airport ownership. The most visible asset may be the least profitable part of the property. By the end of this video, you will understand the 3 airports a private investor can realistically own, why public use does not mean government-owned, what federal assistance may give an eligible private airport, and what it can take away, how fuel and hangars can matter more than landing fees, why deferred runway damage can become a multi-million-dollar reconstruction, how an airport can anchor tens of millions of square feet of surrounding development, why America's most famous privately financed passenger airport defaulted on $113 million of bonds, and how the same $15 million airport can either return more than 10% on equity or require another $2.5 million from its owner in a single bad year. Because you are not really buying a runway, you are buying the right to make aircraft stop on your land. What happens after they stop is the entire business. Before you buy one, you need to decide what the word airport means, because a grass strip behind a ranch, a public-use business airport, and a passenger terminal with scheduled airlines may all appear on a map with a runway symbol. Financially, they are 3 completely different businesses. The first level is a private-use airport. Public use describes who can land there. It does not tell you who owns the land. This can be a grass runway beside a home, a paved strip on a ranch, a fly-in community, or a corporate field reserved for one company. Private use describes access. The owner decides who can use it. The field may be available only to the owner, invited pilots, residents, or approved tenants. Current aviation property listings show why this level attracts wealthy individuals. Small grass strips and air park properties can be advertised for around $1 to $5 million, while larger paved estates and aviation complexes can reach much higher. But most of these are real estate or lifestyle purchases before they are airport businesses. The runway may increase the value of the surrounding homes. Residents may pay association fees. You may rent a few hangars. You may run a flight school or maintenance shop if zoning and approvals allow it. But random business jets do not automatically appear just because the runway exists. The owner has built access for a small community, not a commercial demand engine. This is our main business. Public use does not mean publicly owned. It means the airport is available for use by the general public under its operating conditions rather than only by the owner and invited users. A private individual or company can own. The FAA explicitly recognizes private organizations and individuals as airport operators. At this level, the airport primarily serves general aviation, piston aircraft, flight schools, charter aircraft, corporate jets, medical flights, and privately operated airplanes. It may have instrument approaches. It may sell Jet A and aviation gasoline. It may have an FBO, maintenance companies, aircraft storage, and leased business parcels. It normally does not need a Part 139 airport operating certificate unless it chooses to serve the scheduled or large unscheduled air carrier operations covered by that regulation. That distinction is what makes the central case realistic. You do not need to build a miniature JFK. You need a useful runway in the right market with services that aircraft owners already pay for. Now you want scheduled airlines. You want security lines, baggage systems, rental cars, parking garages, restaurants, airline gates, and hundreds of thousands of passengers. At this level, the airport can still be privately operated. The FAA's Airport Investment Partnership Program allows private companies to own, manage, lease, and develop public airports under a special framework. And Part 139 itself says an airport operator may be a public entity, a private organization, or an individual. Legally, private operation is possible. Economically, you are no longer acting like one wealthy person buying a property. You are assembling institutional capital, government approvals, airline commitments, safety systems, and long-term infrastructure financing. The jump from Level 2 to Level 3 is not one larger terminal. It is a different risk category. Our central airport stops at Level 2. That does not make it small. A 5,200-foot runway can support a meaningful mix of turboprops and business jets, depending on aircraft, weight, weather, and runway conditions. But it keeps the story inside a business that an individual investor, family office, or small investment group could actually own through a company. You are not buying a city's international gateway. You are buying the place where the people who own private jets need to land. And that connects directly to the previous episode. The deed gives you the dirt. It does not give you control of every promise above it. Last time, you owned the airplane and paid for where it had to be next. This time, you own one of the places it has to go. You find the airport. The runway is long enough. The price looks reasonable. You sign the contract and assume that owning the land means owning every decision made on it. That assumption can become very expensive. An airport is a piece of real estate sitting inside an airspace system. The deed gives you the dirt. It does not automatically give you a safe instrument approach, protected airspace, compatible zoning, unlimited development rights, or permission to close the runway and build warehouses tomorrow. If you are creating a new airport or changing the status or use of an existing one, federal regulations require advance notice to the FAA. Form 7480-1 is used to notify the agency at least 90 days before construction, alteration, activation, deactivation, or a change in status or use. But the FAA makes something else clear. Filing with the federal government does not replace state notification, local ordinances, zoning, environmental rules, or other approvals. The FAA studies how the proposal affects the airspace. Your county still controls the ground. Now add federal funding. The Airport Improvement Program principally supports public airport sponsors. A narrower group of privately owned public-use airports can also qualify, especially eligible reliever airports and certain airports with qualifying scheduled passenger activity. Eligibility depends on the sponsor, the airport's role in the national system, and the specific project. For our fictional business aviation airport, you do not underwrite the purchase by assuming federal money will arrive. If the field is an eligible privately owned reliever and the project qualifies, public assistance may reduce the owner's share of pavement, lighting, or safety work. That can sound like the greatest subsidy in real estate. The government helps fund infrastructure that also supports the value of your property. But the grant comes with obligations. A federally obligated airport may have to remain available for public aeronautical use on reasonable terms. It may face restrictions on exclusive rights. Airport-generated revenue may have to remain inside the airport. The owner must maintain funded facilities. The property cannot simply be treated like ordinary land the moment another use becomes more profitable. Federal money can reduce the cash required for pavement, lighting, or safety projects. It can also turn part of your private property into a long-term public commitment. That creates two different ownership strategies. The first is the independent, private airport. You finance improvements yourself, maintain more control, and receive no guarantee that anyone will help when the runway needs several $million. The second, available only to the narrower group that qualifies, is the grant-assisted, public-use airport. You accept public capital, lower the immediate infrastructure burden, and operate inside a system of continuing obligations. Neither is automatically better. The dangerous version is accepting grant money without understanding what you promised in return. Airport due diligence, therefore, begins before the financial model. You need the deed. You need the title report. You need every easement protecting the runway approaches. You need the airport layout plan. You need the grant history. You need the pavement records. You need the fuel tank records. You need the tenant leases. You need to know whether the hangars belong to the airport, to tenants, or to investors holding long ground leases. A $4 million runway problem can hide behind a $2 million purchase price. You need to know whether the instrument approach survives if a neighbor builds a tower. And you need to know whether the city surrounding the airport views you as an economic asset or as a noisy piece of land it would rather redevelop. You are not only buying what is visible, you are inheriting every promise the previous owner made to the government, the tenants, and the airspace above the property. Let us price the Central Airport. You acquire an aging public-use field for $7 million. The purchase includes about 200 acres, one 5,200-foot runway, a parallel taxiway, a small terminal, an old fuel system, 30 existing T-hangars, 4 larger hangars, and several tenant buildings. $7 million sounds cheap for 200 acres near a growing city. That is because the listing price is not the project cost. First comes pavement. Runway pavement is not a parking lot with painted numbers. It must carry aircraft at speed, remain free of dangerous debris, drain correctly, provide adequate friction, and preserve predictable geometry. The FAA's pavement compliance guidance calls for detailed inspections, regular drive-by inspections, and records of deterioration and maintenance at obligated airports. The reason is simple. Small cracks become water intrusion. Water becomes base failure. Base failure becomes reconstruction. In 2026, Danbury Municipal Airport in Connecticut secured a $4.2 million federal grant to rehabilitate a secondary runway that officials had considered decommissioning. That was not a new airport. It was one major repair to one existing runway. Your pre-purchase pavement report therefore matters more than the terminal's furniture. Second comes lighting and navigation. A runway usable only in perfect daylight has a different customer base from one with reliable pilot-controlled lighting and instrument approaches. Business aviation sells time. A customer paying thousands of dollars per hour, does not want the trip to end at another airport because your lights failed or the ceiling fell below visual conditions. Third comes the fuel system. Fuel is one of your most valuable revenue streams and one of your most dangerous liabilities. The New Jersey airport in the opening specifically advertised an 8,000-gallon Jet A tank and highlighted the absence of underground tanks. That line exists for a reason. The EPA regulates underground systems storing petroleum, and a leaking tank can contaminate soil and groundwater, create third-party claims, and force the owner into a long cleanup process.
The cheapest airport can become the most expensive property you have ever purchased if the fuel farm leaked for 20 years before you arrived. Fourth comes the hangars. An empty runway is a piece of pavement. A full hangar is a monthly contract, but the lease structure matters. Some airport owners own the buildings and collect rent. Others lease land to private hangar owners for 30 or 40 years. The airport may appear covered in valuable buildings while owning only the ground beneath them and receiving a modest ground rent. Fifth comes the FBO.
The fixed base operator is the service station, front desk and hotel lobby of business aviation combined. It sells fuel. It parks aircraft. It tows them. It arranges rental cars, catering, and crew transport. It may provide de-icing, maintenance, passenger lounges, pilot facilities, and hangar space. The FBO can be operated by the airport owner or by an outside company paying ground rent, flowage fees, or a percentage of gross receipts. The FAA's compliance manual describes both direct airport charges, such as landing and tie-down fees, and indirect FBO charges, such as fuel flowage fees or percentages of receipts. Sixth comes the land around the runway. The runway creates access. The market creates demand. The airport has to capture both. This may be the most valuable asset of all. Aviation maintenance companies need hangars. Flight schools need offices and apron access. Medical flight operators need bases. Logistics companies need warehouses. Aircraft manufacturers need test and service facilities. The runway makes the land useful to businesses that cannot operate on an ordinary industrial parcel. So your $7 million airport needs $2 million of pavement and lighting work, $1.5 million for new T-hangars, $1.5 million for corporate hangar expansion, $1 million for the fuel system, FBO equipment, and vehicles, $1 million for terminal, drainage, security, and utility improvements, and $1 million of working capital and contingency. Total project cost, $15 million. The property listing sold you an airport. The next $8 million makes it commercially useful. Now your airport is open. A business jet enters the pattern, lands, and taxis toward your FBO. What exactly did you sell? The obvious answer is runway access. But landing fees at many general aviation airports are small, selectively applied, or waived when the aircraft buys enough fuel. That is not irrational. The runway creates access. It does not create demand by itself. Charging the aircraft simply for arriving can discourage a customer you may be able to monetize somewhere else. But removing the fee does not magically produce traffic either. Location, runway capability, approaches, fuel price, hangar availability, nearby businesses, and the final drive from the airport determine whether aircraft choose your field. Think about a shopping mall. The front door allows shoppers to enter. It does not make them want to visit. The market creates demand. The building captures it through stores and leases. Your runway makes aircraft traffic possible. The FBO and airport property monetize the stop. This also explains why operation counts can be misleading. One flight school airplane can perform 5 takeoffs and 5 landings in an afternoon. That produces 10 airport operations. It may buy a modest amount of aviation gasoline at the end of the day, 1 Gulfstream. can create only one landing and one departure. But it may purchase 1,000 gallons of Jet A, pay a handling charge, stay overnight in a corporate hangar, order catering, rent vehicles, and bring executives who value the airport's location. 2 operations can be worth more than 20. A busy airport is not necessarily a profitable airport. A monetized airport is. This changes how you think about customers. The local flight school creates recurring activity, fuel sales, and future pilots. Based aircraft create monthly hangar rent and predictable fuel demand. Transient business jets create large fuel tickets and service fees. Maintenance tenants create ground rent and bring aircraft that may remain for weeks. A medical operator may sign a long lease because location and response time matter more than the lowest rent. A logistics tenant may value direct runway access and highway access together. The airport owner's job is not to maximize the number of aircraft touching the pavement. It is to create the right mix of aircraft and tenants that pay for the fixed infrastructure. The runway is the access point. The market is the magnet. The revenue happens after the wheels stop. The airport has 6 practical revenue layers. Fuel is the most visible transaction. A piston aircraft buys aviation gasoline. A turbine aircraft buys Jet A. You purchase fuel wholesale, store it, test it, insure it, and sell it through trucks or fixed pumps. The dollar value can be enormous. But total fuel sales are not the same thing as fuel profit. If you sell $5 million of Jet A and paid $4 million for the product, card fees and delivery, your economic fuel margin is $1 million, not $5. View matters because the storage, truck, quality control system and staff exist whether the tank moves slowly or quickly. The fuel customer also has bargaining power. Business aviation operators compare prices. Large charter companies negotiate discounts. A jet that can safely tanker extra fuel may buy somewhere else. Your advantage is convenience and location, not monopoly. This is the airport's recurring rent. A T-hangar stores one smaller aircraft. A box hangar can hold larger aircraft, maintenance equipment, or several airplanes. Corporate hangars may include offices, lounges, and private vehicle access. Hangar demand can be far more stable than transient fuel. The airplane owner needs a place every month. And, unlike an apartment tenant, the aircraft cannot be stored in a normal warehouse across town. 2 landings can be worth more than 20. It depends on what the aircraft buys. At Danbury Municipal Airport, officials said land leases alone generate roughly $500,000 per year, and the field plans additional hangars because storage demand remains important. That airport is publicly owned, but the economic lesson applies to a private owner. The durable product is not the landing, it is the protected place beside the landing area. Handling charges, ramp parking, overnight fees, aircraft towing, de-icing, lavatory and water service, catering coordination, rental car commissions, crew transportation, passenger lounges. Some charges are waived when the aircraft buys a minimum amount of fuel. That does not make them fake. It means the FBO is packaging several services into one fuel transaction. You lease airport land to maintenance shops, flight schools, avionics companies, charter operators, hangar developers, and other aviation businesses. The tenant may build the facility. You keep ownership of the land and collect rent over a long term. This can be attractive because private capital constructs buildings while your airport builds an ecosystem. The trade-off is control. A 30-year lease signed too cheaply can remain too cheap for most of your ownership period. Landing fees, tie-down fees, access fees, special event fees, advertising, vehicle parking, These can contribute, but at a general aviation airport, they are usually not the whole thesis. At a major passenger airport, non-aircraft revenue becomes far more dramatic. Cleveland Hopkins reported more than $53 million from parking and ground transportation in 2025, compared with about $16.8 million in passenger airline landing fees. The airport did not stop being an aviation asset, but the cars produced more reported revenue than the act of landing passenger aircraft. Hotels, warehouses, offices, manufacturing, distribution, restaurants, industrial land. This is the largest possible version of the strategy. The airport creates connectivity and identity. The surrounding land captures the value. At that point, the airport may operate on a modest margin, while the development around it produces the real fortune. So the entire revenue model can be summarized in one sentence. Aircraft access creates captive demand for fuel, storage, services, and specialized land. The runway alone is not the business. It is the reason the other businesses can exist there. Let us reduce the economics to one arrival. A super mid-size business jet lands at your airport on Friday afternoon. It will leave Sunday. The aircraft buys 600 gallons of Jet A. Our illustrative FBO earns $1.20 of gross margin per gallon after wholesale fuel cost and card processing cost. Fuel contribution, $720. The handling charge is $350, but you waive it because the jet exceeded the minimum fuel purchase. That sounds like lost revenue. It is not. The handling waiver helped win the larger fuel transaction. The aircraft pays $150 per night for ramp parking. 2 nights? $300. The FBO earns another $100 from catering, transportation, and service coordination. Total gross contribution from the visit before labor and airport overhead, $1,120. The airplane used your runway twice, landing and departure. If you had charged a $100 landing fee and sold nothing else, the same movement would have produced $100. Now, change one fact. The aircraft buys fuel at another airport before arriving. It uses your runway. It occupies ramp space for 2 days. It pays $300 for parking and $100 for other services. Gross contribution falls from $1,120 to $400. Same airplane, same runway, same weekend. The difference is fuel capture. Now change a second fact. The company operating the jet decides your airport is the best location for one of its aircraft. It signs a corporate hangar lease at $5,000 per month and buys fuel throughout the year. The transient customer becomes a based tenant. The value of the relationship is no longer one weekend. It is $60,000 of annual rent before fuel and services. This is why the airport owner watches different numbers from the control tower. Not only operations, based aircraft, fuel gallons per operation, hangar occupancy, revenue per transient visit, tenant retention, ground rent per acre. The runway tells you how many aircraft came. The business report tells you whether any of them mattered. So far, the airport sounds like a specialized real estate business with a fuel station attached. Now comes the reason cheap airports remain cheap. The costs are lumpy. A hotel replaces mattresses room by room. An airport can discover that the entire runway needs work at once. Routine crack sealing and surface maintenance are manageable. Rehabilitation is different. When pavement condition crosses the wrong threshold, you may need milling, overlays, reconstruction, lighting work, and temporary closure. The bill can reach millions. And the closure creates a second loss. Aircraft do not wait outside for your runway to reopen. They establish habits at another airport. Some return. Some sign hangar leases there and never come back. This is why a runway reserve is not optional. Depreciation on a spreadsheet does not put cash in the bank when the contractor arrives. Your fuel system is both inventory and environmental risk. You need quality control procedures, tank monitoring, spill prevention, insurance, records. If an underground system leaks petroleum, the owner may face investigation, soil and groundwater remediation, reporting requirements, and third-party liability. The problem can predate your ownership. That makes environmental due diligence one of the most important parts of the purchase. A beautiful airport with contaminated soil is not a bargain. It is a cleanup company with a runway attached. Aircraft operations are unforgiving. A vehicle enters the movement area. A snowplow damages a light. A tug hits an aircraft worth $30 million. A customer slips on ice. A storm damages hangars containing other people's airplanes. The airport owner, FBO operator, maintenance tenant, and aircraft operator may all carry different insurance policies. The moment something happens, every policy begins asking which company controlled which part of the event. The airport may be open 24 hours, while your FBO is not. Business aircraft arrive late. Fuel trucks require trained employees. Snow and ice do not respect the schedule. If you promise after-hours service, somebody must answer the phone, drive to the airport, and operate safely at 2 in the morning. If you do not promise it, the customer may choose the airport that does. An airport can exist for 70 years and still become politically fragile after new houses are built nearby. The new residents may have purchased beside a runway. They may still oppose noise, night operations, and expansion. The owner can win every technical argument and lose the zoning vote. The airport's value therefore depends on land it does not own. Approach protection, compatible surrounding use, road access, political tolerance. The perimeter fence is not the true boundary of the asset. Federal or state grants can pay a large share of eligible improvements, but the owner must satisfy eligibility rules, match requirements, and long-term obligations. The improvement may also be scheduled according to a public funding cycle rather than your preferred business timeline. You can own an airport with a runway that needs $4 million. You can also own an airport that qualifies for most of that money. The difference may be hidden in decades of documents. This is why the cheapest part of airport ownership is sometimes the purchase agreement. Everything expensive is in the records room. If you want to understand the highest version of the airport model, look at AllianceTexas. But describe it accurately. Perot Field Fort Worth Alliance Airport is owned by the city of Fort Worth. It is not simply a private billionaire's runway. The private sector story is the partnership and development system around it. Hillwood, the real estate company founded by Ross Perot Jr., worked with the city and federal government to develop what became the world's first industrial airport designed around cargo and corporate aviation. The airport now has two 11,000-foot runways. The wider AllianceTexas development includes logistics parks, rail, highways, warehouses, manufacturing, corporate facilities, an Amazon Air Hub, FedEx, and UPS operations. AllianceTexas reports more than 64 million square feet of development, more than 600 companies, and an estimated $142.9 billion in economic impact from 1990 through 2025. Those numbers describe a huge mixed public-private development, not airport operating profit. And that is exactly the point. The runway did not need to produce the entire return by charging aircraft to land. And it did not create Fort Worth's industrial demand by itself. It became powerful because the airport was combined with highways, rail, active development, and tenants that already needed those connections. Together, that system made surrounding land uniquely valuable for companies that needed air cargo and industrial space in one location. The airport was the anchor. The real estate ecosystem was the compounding asset. This is the lesson available to our smaller owner. You do not need 27,000 acres or an 11,000-foot runway. But you should ask the same question. What can exist on this land because the runway is here? A maintenance shop that cannot operate in a normal office park. A medical flight base that needs direct apron access. A charter operator that wants hangar, office, and fuel together. A manufacturer that needs to test or deliver aircraft. A logistics company that values both highway and runway access. The weak airport owner waits for random airplanes. The strong airport owner builds reasons for aircraft and aviation companies to remain on the property. That is how a runway changes from an expense into infrastructure supporting rent. The airplane may stay for an hour. The tenant may stay for 30 years. Now look at the other end of private airport ownership. Branson Airport in Missouri opened in 2009 as the first privately financed and operated commercial service airport in the United States. The original fact sheet presented an extraordinary story. A project cost of $155 million, 922 acres, an initial projection of 500,000 passengers annually, more than 1.5 million passengers within 5 years. Private financing would allow creative airline, vendor, and concession deals without the ordinary municipal process. This was not a foolish fantasy with no market. Branson was a major tourism destination. The airport had a real runway, a real terminal, and a real reason to believe travelers wanted easier access. But passenger demand and airline interest fell far short of the original expectations. The company struggled to generate the revenue required to repay its bonds. Branson Airport LLC eventually defaulted on $113 million of debt, and a court-approved settlement gave bondholders new debt and a majority equity stake. The airport did not fail because private organizations are legally incapable of operating airports. It failed financially because infrastructure and debt arrived before enough durable airline demand. This is the dangerous difference between general aviation and scheduled passenger service. A business aviation airport can build around many smaller relationships: hangar tenants, fuel customers, flight schools, maintenance companies, charter operators, land leases. A passenger airport can become dependent on a small number of airlines controlling most of the traffic. The airport owner may spend hundreds of millions. The airline can move capacity to another city. The terminal cannot follow it. Branson also exposes the trap inside optimistic projections. The business model was not built on the passengers already using the airport. It was built on passengers expected to arrive later. Debt service began in the present. Demand existed in the future. That timing gap is where infrastructure projects break. The lesson for our $15 million airport is simple. Do not build the next phase because aircraft might come. Build it because customers have already demonstrated why they need it. A hangar waiting list is evidence. A signed ground lease is evidence. Fuel volume at nearby congested airports is evidence. A presentation predicting that private jets will discover your town is not evidence. The runway can last for decades. Your cash can disappear in 2 years. Branson leaves you with a better order for buying our $15 million airport. Do not begin with the runway. Begin with 5 things the runway must be able to support. Confirm ownership, zoning, approaches, easements, operating status, tenant rights, and every federal or state obligation attached to the field. Make sure the runway can remain open, the approaches can remain usable, and the local government is not quietly waiting for the day the land becomes warehouses or housing. A cheap airport with an expiring aviation use is not cheap. It is land with a countdown clock. Commission independent pavement engineering. Review drainage, lighting, electrical systems, and snow or storm requirements. Inspect the fuel farm and complete environmental due diligence. Read the records instead of accepting the sentence that the tanks have never caused a problem. A beautiful terminal cannot compensate for a failing pavement base or contaminated soil. Study based aircraft, fuel records, hangar waiting lists, and the congestion or pricing problems at competing airports. Interview local owners and operators. Then, ask why an aircraft would use this field instead of the next one. Runway length matters. Approaches matter. Fuel price matters. Hangar availability matters. The final drive to the customer's actual destination matters. The runway creates access. Those factors create the choice. Secure anchor tenants before building speculative hangars. A maintenance shop, charter operator, flight school, medical operator, or corporate tenant can turn an empty parcel into contracted income. Then map who controls the FBO, the tanks, the trucks, and the customer account. If another operator sells the fuel, understand whether you receive ground rent, flowage fees, or a share of receipts. An airport can create valuable traffic while somebody else captures the transaction. Fund the purchase as though one major infrastructure project will arrive earlier than expected. Do not distribute every good year. Then map every parcel that can support hangars, maintenance, offices, logistics, or another compatible use that benefits from runway access. Finally, choose the operating structure that matches your capability. You can own the airport and lease the FBO to a specialist. You can operate the FBO yourself and capture more contribution. You can lease land while tenants finance their own buildings. Or you can build and own the hangars for higher income and higher capital exposure. If you are a real estate investor, you may not want to dispatch a fuel truck at midnight. If you are an FBO operator, you may not want to carry 200 acres in a runway reconstruction reserve. The correct model separates the risks you understand from the risks somebody else is being paid to carry. Only after these 5 proofs do you calculate a return. So now, take the same airport, the same debt, and the same physical runway through 2 different futures. Now, build our central airport. The model is fictional and educational. It is not an appraisal, national average, or investment projection. You purchase the aging airport and complete the first expansion for a total project cost of $15 million. You finance 65%. Debt, $9,750,000. Equity, $5,250,000. The debt carries a 7.5% rate and amortizes over 20 years. Annual debt service is approximately $956,000. Your airport has 1 5,200-foot paved runway, 60 T hangars, 8 corporate hangars, an owner-operated FBO, Jet A and Aviation gasoline, 4 primary aviation tenants, and additional land available for future development. To keep the model readable, every income line is expressed as gross operating contribution, not GAAP revenue. Fuel is shown after wholesale fuel cost and card processing cost. Rental and service lines are shown after transaction-specific pass-throughs, but before shared airport payroll, insurance, utilities, maintenance, administration, and other overhead. Now operate it well. You focus on based aircraft and recurring tenants before chasing airline service. The hangars are nearly full. The airport captures 900,000 gallons of annual fuel volume across Jet A and Aviation gasoline. After wholesale fuel cost and card processing cost, the modeled gross margin is $1.25 per gallon. Fuel contribution, $1,125,000. The 60 T hangars average 95% occupancy at $750 per month. Annual T-hangar contribution, approximately $513,000. The 8 corporate hangars average 90% occupancy at $5,000 per month. Annual corporate hangar contribution, $432,000. Combined hangar contribution, $945,000. Handling, ramp parking, de-icing, towing, and service coordination adds $700,000 of contribution. Ground leases to the flight school, maintenance company, charter operator, and medical flight tenant contribute $850,000. Office rent, maintenance participation, advertising, vehicle parking, and other airport uses contribute $450,000. Total annual gross operating contribution, $4,070,000. Now subtract the shared operation. Payroll and benefits for FBO, operations, maintenance, and administration, $850,000. Routine pavement, lighting, grounds, utilities, and snow or storm preparation, $300,000. Insurance, environmental compliance, and professional services, $225,000. Airport equipment, fuel trucks, vehicles, and repairs, $250,000. Sales, administration, software, and customer service, $175,000. Property expense, taxes, and other operating costs, $250,000. Total shared operating expense, $2,050,000. Cash before financing, $2,020,000. Subtract annual debt service of approximately $956,000. Then contribute $400,000 to a dedicated major pavement, lighting, and fuel system reserve. Pre-tax cash flow to equity, approximately $664,000. On $5,250,000 of equity, the illustrative cash yield is about 12.6%. That is a successful airport. But notice where the money came from. Only a small share required charging aircraft for the act of landing. Fuel produced about 28% of modeled gross operating contribution. Hangars produced about 23%. Tenant land, services, and other property uses created most of the rest. The runway gave the customers access. The ground paid the owner. And even in the good case, the company keeps only about 16 cents of cash after debt and major reserve for every dollar of modeled gross operating contribution. This is not a passive strip of pavement. It is a 24-hour infrastructure and service business wrapped around specialized real estate. Now by the same airport with the same $15 million project cost, same runway, same debt, same number of hangars, same FBO building, but this time you make the mistakes that airport renderings encourage. You assume the runway itself will create demand. You build corporate hangars before signing tenants. You price fuel too high to protect margin. You accept short-term event traffic as proof of recurring business. Same airport. More than $3 million apart in 1 year. You fail to recruit a strong maintenance tenant, and you market the airport across the entire region without solving the final 15 minutes between the airport and the businesses travelers actually want to reach. Fuel volume reaches only 350,000 gallons. The weaker mix and discounts produce 95 cents of gross margin per gallon. Fuel contribution, approximately $333,000. Hangar occupancy falls to 70%. Annual hangar contribution, $378,000. Only half of the corporate hangars are occupied. Annual corporate hangar contribution, $240,000. Handling, parking, and other FBO services contribute $250,000. Ground leases contribute $550,000. Other airport uses contribute $225,000. Total annual gross operating contribution, approximately $1,976,000. The airport is less busy. The fixed system does not shrink at the same speed. You still need trained staff, insurance, lighting, mowing, snow or storm response, security, fuel quality control, pavement inspection, utilities, accounting. You reduce hours and delay hiring, but total shared operating expense remains $1,750,000. Cash before financing, only $226,000. Annual debt service is still approximately $956,000. You reduce the major reserve to $250,000 because the company needs cash. That creates a pre-tax cash loss of approximately $980,000. Then the pavement report arrives. A deteriorating section of taxiway and runway shoulder can no longer be delayed. The airport's required owner contribution for the first phase is $1.5 million after available outside support. Total cash outflow for the year, approximately $2,480,000. Same airport, same debt, same physical runway. The difference between Model A and Model B is more than $3 million in 1 year. And the week. Airport can still look alive from the road. Airplanes take off. Students train. The beacon turns at night. The owner simply writes checks behind the terminal to keep all of it happening. This is why airport traffic does not equal airport health. The weak model has operations. It does not have enough monetized relationships. At that burn rate, 2 bad years consume almost the entire original equity investment. The land may retain value. The airport may eventually be sold. But now you are selling while the runway needs money and the tenants know the owner is under pressure. The airport remains an asset. Your negotiating position does not. You began this video wanting to own an airport. The image was the runway. Your logo beside it. Aircraft descending over your property. Now the asset looks different. Runway creates access. The approaches protect that access. The FBO converts traffic into fuel and service revenue. The hangars turn aircraft into monthly tenants. The ground leases turn aviation companies into long-term rent. The surrounding land captures the value created by connectivity. And the reserve account keeps one pavement project from taking the company away from you. Yes, a private individual or company can own an airport in the United States. A current asking market example was advertised for less than the price of some luxury homes. A private organization can even operate an airport serving scheduled airlines if it accepts the certification, capital, and regulatory burden. But ownership does not make the runway profitable. The airport is valuable only when customers have a reason to choose that access and spend money somewhere else on the property. That is why the small, public-use airport can outperform the ambitious passenger terminal. One sells fuel, storage, and specialized land to customers who already exist. The other may borrow against passengers expected to arrive later. It is why a city-owned industrial airport can anchor a private real estate ecosystem around it, and why a privately financed passenger airport can have a real terminal, real airplanes, and still default on more than $100 million of debt. In the private jet episode, the aircraft owner paid for where the airplane had to be next. Now you own that place. But being the destination is not enough. The aircraft must fuel there, sleep there, receive maintenance there, or support a tenant that pays to remain there. The runway gives aircraft access. The ground around it creates the business.